Good morning, friends. My name is Shelby. If you are new here, I have so much exciting and new stuff to get to. It's been a few weeks since I filmed out here. I'm not gonna lie, I decided to prioritize the holidays. There was just too much going on. But now there's way too much going on in the garden for me to ignore it anymore. So I'm so happy to be back out here and talk about some of the really cool things coming up in the 2025 garden. Let's get started. So this year I decided I wanted to really hit strawberries hard, as well as other fruits. But for this video's purposes, I'm going to talk about the strawberries because I'm actually getting those going. So it's my first year ever ordering bare root strawberries. In the past, I had just bought a few plants and they had, spawned off a few extra strawberry plants, and, I enjoyed a handful of strawberries at a time to bring, not even to bring into the house. We would just always eat them before they made their way into the house. But through that whole process, I started to realize how easy it is to grow strawberries in Florida. I would have thought because they appear to be a sensitive berry that it would be really complicated and really disease ridden. But as far as all of the experience that I have with growing just a few plants, I didn't really have a big pest issue. Now, I'm sure growing the berries in a different location and attempting to grow them on a larger scale, I'll definitely experience more challenges that I wasn't anticipating, but we're gonna give it a go. So all it says on Amazon is that these are all-star strawberries. They're supposed to be larger, more giant fruit, but it doesn't have like a specific name to what these are. I also ordered 10 ever-bearing strawberries, which they will produce more fruit through the season. There's June bearing and then there's ever bearing. So the June bearing are going to produce most of their fruit at one time, and the ever bearing are going to produce a little bit as the season goes. Then I also ordered Sweet Charlie, which are not doing too good. So I believe I ordered 25 Sweet Charlie, 10 of the All Stars, and 10 of the ever bearing. And I do plan to order, I would hope, about 50 more so that I can have a total of 100 strawberry plants, because I feel like that would be definitely enough for our family to enjoy as much as we want, while also preserving and freezing and, all that good stuff. I got my pots already prepared, so I decided to go with a 4-inch size for my strawberry pots. Now there is one bigger size in this that would be better if you didn't have plans on where you're going to put your strawberries, or maybe you just needed more time. But I'm just mostly using this as a growing medium. I was fine with just buying the 4-inch size, because really all strawberries need is the 4 to 6 inches for a root system, and I don't plan to have these in here for very long. We're just gonna see how it works. So the strawberries I'm most concerned with starting today are the Sweet Charlie strawberries, because they just didn't really look very good in the packaging. They look kind of like a little bit moldy. So I'm really interested to see how this turns out. I don't know if you can see that. I'm not an expert at everything. I'm just trying to learn and figure things out. I'm somebody who is really okay with failing. I'm really okay with trial and error. Please don't take this as like a expert advice on how to grow strawberries, because I'm just okay with going for it. Tray 1 is done. That took no time, and I'm sure that there's people who are seasoned strawberry bare root growers who are probably cringing at what I just did, but we're just giving it a try and see what goes on. So my goal ultimately is to get these plants in the ground by February, like around February time. That way they can really establish in the actual, where their long-term home by March, and then hopefully we'll get a harvest by March, ? I'm not exactly sure. I think it's about 3 months. That would be great. So I do have some other things I want to show you guys and kind of talk about. I'm going to put my camera on a tripod here. Okay. Now, I have these absolutely stunning, if I can get a decent shot with all of the sun and everything coming through, but I have a absolutely stunning spinach that I have started in my seed starting trays. Now, I should honestly just change my like YouTube to some type of like messy gardener type handle, because that is what I am. I'm just a messy gardener. I'm okay with things being unorganized, and I'm okay with there just being an all-out mess. So I dumped a whole seed packet into 2 trays of spinach, and voila, I have a million spinach sprouts that are doing really well, by the way. Now my job is to fish these out and start plugging them in through the garden. Now I should have done this a week ago. I did not, you know, because of the holidays and everything. I'm gonna start getting these in the ground so we can enjoy spinach during this cooler season, because it's really hard to grow spinach any other time of the year in Florida. You guys, look at how healthy and vibrant these spinach plants are right now. I feel like that's like a vision of health. Okay, so now I'm gonna get these plugged in different parts of the garden. Now I don't know what I did when I planted out this garden bed. I must have lost my mind, but I left a whole section right here, not intentionally. And for a few weeks I was like, what did I plant there? Like, why isn't it growing at all? And then finally I was like, I guess I didn't plant anything at all there. So I'm gonna get the spinach there and basically plug it in everywhere else that has open areas in my garden. This bed's really interesting, and I'll give you guys like a little rundown. So I have Swiss chard right here, pak choi that is just taking off. Nothing right here yet. Dill, which is doing fabulously. Some kale, and this one is the scarlet kale. And then back behind this bed, which is kind of like a little party, we have broccoli and cauliflower and a few tomato volunteers. So I really started embracing and I don't even know if this actually is a method that people do. I'm just gonna go ahead and like give it a name, the dump seed method. When I did my onions, now I know typically that's how people sprout a large amount of onions. They'll just put a lot in one container and they fish the onion sprouts away from one another. And that was absolutely perfect. I've got wonderful, healthy onions that didn't have any type of root issue from disturbing the roots. So I touched on this earlier, but what I do is I use my little stainless steel trays, and you can use really any type of tray, whether that's like a plastic tray or anything like that. I put a whole bunch of soil down. I fill it up with soil, seed sprouting soil, compost, whatever you would typically use to sprout your seeds. I just dump a whole seed packet in, I would say, 2 different trays. I do like soil blocking, which would be like those individual little blocks. I find soil blocking is ideal for like growing peppers and tomatoes, things like that. I would not want to do this dump method. But when we're talking about greens, I would say that they're more forgiving and you can move them around a little bit more. After they get to a mature place, I just fish out a big portion of soil, and then it ends up looking like this. Now there's a few in here, and I just very gently massage the roots away from one another, like so. See? And then now I have 3 plants I can just plug in wherever I see fit. I didn't have to go through the whole tedious task of creating an individual soil block for each one of these. Okay, this bed is looking absolutely lovely and clean, like a person who would, you know, be really meticulous in the garden, which is not typically me. I love growing things in the cooler months because I feel like it gives me the opportunity to be a little bit cleaner like that. In the summer months, it's like wild, crazy, weeds are everywhere. I mean, me and the nature that is happening, we're in like this huge tug of war. So it's nice in the winter months just to be able to like actually garden at a slower pace and be able to not have to combat a whole bunch of different elements. So we got all of those little spinach starts in. I have a lot more to plug in all around the garden. I'm not gonna plug them all in this video just because it wouldn't be very interesting to watch me plug in 100 spinach starts all through the garden. But I just wanted to show you guys how you could do that if you were just like, I want to sprout a whole bunch of things and do it really quickly. On that note, I have done it again with beets. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a good method with beets. I don't know if they're sensitive to root, like their roots being disturbed, but I did the same thing with beets. I also just poured a few of my broccoli and cauliflower and basil seeds down the line in this tray too, and I just really loaded it up. So I'm gonna put some beets all around. Now, if you're a current subscriber, you will be maybe noticing a little bit of something new. We started putting pavers through my like big in-ground no-dig garden rows, and it was actually really easy. So my motivation was, I thought there was a gopher turtle eating all of my young sprouts. Turns out I don't think it was a gopher turtle. It is probably a bunny, which makes more sense, and I'll get more into that later. But my motivation was to start putting some pavers out so it'd be harder for the turtle to navigate in here, and then, you know, turns out it just ends up looking nice, less weeds to pull, and I can just focus more on my no-dig garden rows. We still do have a little bit of a bunny issue, but if you're new here, welcome to my no-dig garden area. So I'm just going to show you guys some of what's already going on in my big no-dig garden area. Now, we do no-till. I just do deep mulching here, and it works really fantastic. I never thought that would be a good option in Florida because of how strong the presence of weeds and other different things in the ground going on, grass, is here in Florida. But turns out this is a really great method. So I have tons of tomatoes growing right now, which is so crazy. We're just days away from January and we have tomatoes growing. They've started setting fruit probably in a rush because of the cold snaps that we're getting. It's the weirdest weather in the month of December. We'll have days that are like 75 to almost 80 degrees for like 4 days, and then we'll have temperatures that drop down at night to like 40 degrees, and then during the day like 60 degrees or so, and it's all over the place. We'll have 2-3 days of that and then hotter temperatures, so the plants don't really know how to behave, but as a result, I always end up with a lot of tomato volunteers, which this is just another volunteer plant, wherever I've planted tomatoes in the past. And now I'm just deciding to embrace that and then try to nurture those plants so that they're ready to just take off running as soon as spring comes along. Because last year I had 2 plants that were volunteers. They did the same thing similarly. They naturally germinated during a few hot days in December. I kept them alive, and as soon as it was March, those plants were setting fruit. So I have some older tomato plants right here, as you'll see, but these were started in September. So it's about time for them to start giving me tomatoes, and there's lots of different tomatoes growing on these plants right now. So having tomato plants that are producing tomatoes going into January is crazy exciting to me. But I'm going to get into the tomato plants and what I'm growing and do a little harvest in just a few minutes. First, I'm going to get some of these beet sprouts in the ground. Now, if you are a Florida gardener, my message to you is don't box yourself in during these months. Now, In like last year, for example, I focused a lot on brassicas. I'm glad that I did it. I focused a lot on cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, and I'm doing that again in the winter months as well. But I just stopped altogether working on any type of warm weather crops. I ended up having a great garden. It was fine, but it was really just exclusive to those types of crops, like the cold weather crops. Now this year, I decided I'm gonna get a lot of these warm weather crops started in September. I started a ton of different pepper plants, which are thriving right now. I started a bunch of different tomato plants, which are doing really great. And then I also just started to nurture the tomato plants that were acting as volunteers. And I got a lot of winter squash started. So I started all of those things in September, October, even as late as a few hot days in December, because I decided the spring last year was so intense. It was a lot warmer than I had anticipated. I felt like the spring before that was a lot cooler for a lot longer, and I really was caught off guard. I felt like I was super late to the game when it came to spring, because I kind of waited till like the second week of March to plant out all of my transplants. Things got so hot so quickly, and I feel like I really missed the window for that kind of like sensitive, innocent time to be able to grow things without a lot of pressure from pests and weeds. So this year I decided I'm going to treat these winter months and the fall months like it is spring. And let me just say, these have been the most spring feeling months I've ever felt. I mean, it feels amazing outside right now, and I'm just going to try to soak it up and take advantage of the cooler nights for those cool winter crops, but the warm temperatures in the day for the hot crops. And I feel like everything is this little experiment of just treating December like it's March or January like it's March has been working so far. I'm sure as the months get a little bit cooler, approaching January and February, we'll definitely see some of the warmer crops take a beating as a result. But that's why I have certain things growing at certain times. So what I'm gonna do next is get some of these tomatoes harvested, which is like crazy to even say that I have tomatoes ready to harvest, bring inside. And I'm also going to show you guys a few other things. I don't even know what is what, honestly, on a lot of these plants, because a lot of them are volunteers, but it's really cool to be harvesting absolutely perfect, beautiful tomatoes right now. Okay, not too shabby of a harvest. Some of the tomatoes look a little on the rougher side, I will say, but there have been various amounts of pests that have started to attack these tomatoes. I think it's because I have already grown tomatoes in this particular area and I haven't rotated the crops. So that definitely tells me that I need to expand this garden out even further and start flip-flopping my tomato patch and whatever else I'm planting here seasonally, because I feel like the pests have already started to figure out like this is the place for the tomatoes. I also really need to get peas in the ground. Now that is what told me there was an issue with the bunnies, which I originally thought might have been tortoise. So I had all these amazing pea sprouts that were growing, and by now I would have had like actually a really good mature pea crop by now, sweet pea. But then I had a little bunny that started coming through and eating through all my pea sprouts, and also my broccoli sprouts that I didn't hear. Now, I didn't have an issue with any of that in the raised bed garden because the bunnies just can't get in there. Now, I don't know if you guys can see just literally rows and rows of onions right here, which is also really close to where the bunnies happen to take hostage and live their merry life. I figured, okay, if they're going to be eating all of the peas right here, then they're going to be eating all my onions next. Well, it had been a few weeks of the onions just like growing undisturbed, and I figured, what is going on? Like, did the bunnies just lose interest, or was it actually a tortoise? And then I looked it up online. Bunnies are deathly allergic to onions. Now, everything I saw online, that's what it says, and someone could definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that fun fact, but that is what it says. It says that they will avoid onions just because of like the strong smell, and that if they consume the onions, they are deathly allergic to them, which I had no clue. So now that I don't want to step on my onions, now that my onions are getting bigger, I would assume that there's more of like a pungent smell, and less of my crops are being disturbed, like my carrots that we're getting the heads eaten off of them are now being undisturbed because they're surrounded by onions. So that was a totally unintentional garden finding, and now I'm gonna just start planting onions all around anything that's sensitive, including all of my sweet pea crops, and also planting them in different places just to cover all my bases, because this is the time to plant peas. It's really hard to grow them any other time of the year in Florida. So that's a little fun fact for you. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is growing poppies. Now, growing poppies in Florida feels like you're forcing something that would not normally work. They are a cold weather loving flower. Now, with that said, I have successfully grown poppies before. I have not really knocked it out of the park, but I have definitely gotten some success here and there. And honestly, just a few poppy blooms is enough to make like my whole garden season for me. So I try and try and try every single year, and I learn a little bit every single year from my mistakes from last year. Now, this year I did my dump method with the poppies. And look at that, look how great this went. So I dumped a whole bunch of poppy seeds on each tray. Here's another tray, and these are all different varieties. I've got the scarlet peony poppy, this is the hens and chickens poppy, and then the rose and feather poppy, which had less germination. In the back, I have the black swan poppy, which that one actually only had like 1 or 2 sprouts, so it's really interesting to see which ones just responded so well. I just dumped whole seed packets in the soil when it was a few days of really cold temperatures at night. Now that's the key. You want to make sure that there's going to be like 40-degree type temperatures at nighttime if you're going to be trying to sprout poppies in a warmer climate. After I sprinkled the tops with the seed packets, I just covered them with plastic wrap loosely, and this created a greenhouse effect. Of course, I watered it too, and this created a little greenhouse effect. All the moisture kind of went to the top, and you're creating a winterization effect that the poppy seeds would normally go through. Think about what the poppy seeds typically go through up north. They're under the snow. They're not even put in the ground like at all. I didn't even like put them in at all. I just dusted them on the top. They're just laying there under the snow, and as soon as it becomes spring, the snow melts off and those poppy seeds start to germinate. So I made sure when I covered these with the plastic wrap that they were out in the sun and that it was cooler temperatures, because they not only need the cold temperatures to germinate, they also need light stratification to germinate. Because like I was just saying before, imagine when that snow is melting off, suddenly they're exposed to the light and they also have that cold temperature. They're just sitting right there on the surface, and then they start to germinate and become a plant. And these germinated within, I would say, a week. and I feel like the method just worked really well. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to grab them out and put them in different places. I'm not going to plant them today, but I did just want to share with you, if you are somebody who's gardening in a warmer climate, definitely get these really sensitive cold weather crops that wouldn't typically work started now. That way you can have a little bit of extra space to grow and have them get established before March comes around and things start to get very unpredictable as far as like warmer temperatures. So I'm really just treating my entire garden like it is spring, because the way I see it is people up north, their spring will typically have similar temperatures that we're experiencing in our winter season. And I just came to the realization that I'm not going to stop myself from growing some of these things that people can grow successfully in these cooler temperatures, like zucchini and winter squash. And hey, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. A lot of these things I'm growing are vertical. It's really at no consequence and it's working out. So if you're growing in like zones 8, 9, 10, I just want to encourage you to get these things started now, because it's working out and I'm beyond excited to see what the garden's going to look like in just a few months. So that is everything for today. Thank you guys for hanging out with me, listening to me yap. I promise I'm not going to go 2 weeks without an upload again moving forward. I just had to take a little bit of break for the winter season or the Christmas season, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you again. Bye.